Today marks 25 years since the abolishment of capital punishment, and to discuss this milestone, we're now joined in studio here in Johannesburg by the South African Human Rights Commission chairperson, Professor Bongani Majola. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for inviting me.
And also in Cape Town, we have the Deputy Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Mr. John Jeffry. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let me start with you, Prof. 25 years down the line, Human Rights Commission, I suppose you've always been pro-life and against the death penalty. So as this milestone is reached, your position remains the same?
Our position remains the same. But before I continue speaking, I'd just like to say to the Deputy Minister that we are very happy and would like to congratulate him for his appointment. We will be able to continue where we stopped in the last Parliament. And yes, we are still committed to life, and we still believe that the death penalty is not the solution because of many reasons, apart from the fact that it would be a violation of the Constitution. Our view is that the death penalty has not been proven to lessen crime, to reduce crime. You know, there are studies that have been done elsewhere. For example, there is a study done in the US which showed that in those states that have the death penalty, the crime statistics were higher than in those states that actually didn't have the death penalty. But the death penalty also is final and irrevocable. If there is a mistake in imposing the death penalty and, God forbid, in executing it, then there is no going back when you discover that actually it's the wrong person.
Okay, we'll discuss this, whether the death penalty is a deterrent or not. But let's cross to the Deputy Minister of Correctional Services, Justice and Correctional Services, Mr. John Jeffry. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. And as we've just heard from the Prof, congratulations once again on your appointment. So as the ANC and as government, you must be pleased that this law was instituted years ago and remains one of the pillars of our justice system.
Yes, very much. But I think it's also important to spell out exactly how the death penalty came to be abolished in South Africa, because there's no actual law. It's a court judgment, effectively, of the Constitutional Court that abolished the death penalty. Prior to that, we were very much, as South Africa in the apartheid period, one of the hanging capitals of the world. Between 1981 and 1989, some 1,100 people were executed. When it came then to the new constitutional dispensation, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, provides for the right to life and that people should be protected from cruel and inhuman treatment. And a case was brought to the court. It was heard in February 1995, a case brought by a Mr. Makwanyana and a Mr. Mchunu, who'd been sentenced to death. And the court heard argument in February and gave judgment then today. And the effect of that judgment was that the death penalty was unconstitutional. I think it's still very much worth a read because each of the judges on the Constitutional Court, they all agreed the death penalty was unconstitutional, but each of the judges the main judgment was written by Arthur Chaskelson, but each of them gave their own version as to why they didn't think the death penalty should be in operation in South Africa.
Is this something that perhaps could be put to the public and say that in our country, actually we do want the death penalty? Some countries feel very strongly about it, and we know that there's some political parties agitating for it. Is this something that you think maybe the public can decide on?
Well, legally it would need a constitutional amendment, probably a number of sections. So a referendum would just be a guide. If we though, have a referendum on the death penalty, should we not have referenda on other aspects of the Bill of Rights? For example, the property clause and things like that. So once you start going down that path, then it's difficult where you'll actually end up. It's an emotive issue. I think Prof. Majola had spoken about people's view that it's a deterrent, but the evidence doesn't seem to show that. And if you really want to have the death penalty as a deterrent, then would it not be better to go back to public executions? Because that will upset people and put them off committing crimes, presumably if it's the death penalty that they're scared about. So I think it's something that has to be looked at rationally. And as Professor Majola had said, one of the strong aspects is if you make a mistake, mistakes do happen in our justice system across the world where an innocent person can be found guilty. If you've made a mistake, that's it. You can't bring them back to life again. But if they're imprisoned for life, you can release them. The other aspect is that it's also poorer people, people from poorer backgrounds, who are going to be the people who are going to be executed. That is always what happens across the world. So the point I'm really making is, yes, the public should have their view, but it's an emotive view often, which isn't necessarily borne out by rationality.
All right, Prof. So, some people might say, especially in the case of a murder, that person's taken someone else's right to life. How is it that you can enjoy yours?
Well, that's an eye for an eye. And when we adopted the new constitution, we said we wanted a new constitutional order, which is based on humanity and the respect for human rights. And we cannot be the state that then takes life and actually violates the rights of others. There is no proof that if you sentence a person to death, then the punishment is more effective. The sentence can be more equally effective if you sentence the person to life imprisonment and so on. It's punishment. In fact, my own view is that when a person is dead, they stop realizing the wrongfulness of their act. If they are in prison on a daily basis, they know that, But besides, ours is to promote life, not to take life.
All right, Professor Majola, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And Deputy Minister John Jeffry, thank you very much indeed as well for joining us on the programme. And that's it. So 25 years ago, South Africa's Constitutional Court ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional. And since then, we haven't had capital punishment in the country. And that continues to be the status quo.